Okay, next card, the Fell Hunter. Costs 3 less if your opponent cast a spell last turn. It's a 4/4 demon, 6 mana, which effectively means if your opponent casts a spell, it becomes a 4/4 for 3 mana. Otherwise, it's a 6 mana spell, which means it's conditionally playable if your opponent doesn't play the spell, and this is a card you wanted to play or needed to play, you're basically screwed. Which is actually a pretty big drawback, because there are going to be a lot of turns where your opponent doesn't play spells. Yes, if you hold on to this card for a few turns, your opponent will eventually play a spell, most cases, and you'll be able to play it then. But what if it's off curve? What if, like, it's turn 4 where they play a spell, and then it comes back to your turn 4, and you could play this for 4 mana? It's not really that OP at 4 mana. It's really only that strong if you get it out on turn 3, or a turn where you can at least make a perfect mana curve. And a 4/4, just a pure 4/4, that's not that OP anymore. I mean, you're looking at 3/4s, basically the angels, the Angel of Darkness and the Angel of Light, which are 3/4s, have no drawback, and if you cast a spell on them, have insane effects. So this card might be playable. It certainly might be playable in something like a Zoo, or just a mid-range demon deck, but it's not OP. I would say this is a fairly well-balanced card. Drawback is at least, well, is it as bad as 50% chance to miss over Ogre Brute, basically, or attack the wrong target? I'd say it's on par with that. It is a big drawback, but it's also pretty easy to avoid the drawback just by waiting for your opponent to play a spell. Okay, it's a card. I reasonably like it. Next up, 4 mana Frost Totem. It is going to have 4 health, which is quite a bit for a totem, actually. That's the most health of any totem. Even in the new expansion, they do have the Totem Golem, which is a 3/4 for 2 mana with Overload 1. So this is tied with that. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to the enemy hero and freeze it. Okay. Freezing your opponent's hero, is that really that big of a deal? It's not like this is Freeze Mage. If this was a Mage card, it would actually be good. It would actually be good. But this is Shaman we're talking about. Shaman have one other freeze card. It's Frost Shock, deal 1 damage and freeze the target. But there's nothing to synergize with enemies being frozen. Sure, it prevents your opponent's weapons from getting a chance to attack, but 4 mana, that's kind of a steep price to pay. So really, you're looking at the deal 1 damage to your opponent's hero every single turn. So it's basically like a 1/4 that always hits your opponent's face and freezes it. No. That's not going to cut it. Water Elemental. 3/6 for 4 mana that you can use to attack your opponent's face, or you can freeze a minion if you want. And that costs 4 mana too. And it's not played. This card is just not strong enough. I think at a bare minimum it needs to be dropped down to a 3 mana totem. Even then it's not that great. But at 3 mana maybe it would have a niche use. They would have to really add crazy shaman cards that are like, oh, your opponent's frozen, so now they're screwed, for that to even be worth considering. Freeze is just not that valuable of an effect. This could even be a 2 mana card, honestly, and it wouldn't be that OP. A 2 mana 1/4 that always freezes your opponent. Think about like the 2 mana 2/3 Snow Chugger. That's a card that's playable. It's not super OP, but it's playable. So if you have a mech mage, it's played. It's good in mech mage because it's a mech. This card could be 2 mana. It really could. It's underwhelming. Okay, next up, 2 mana Furious Whelp. 2/2 Dragon. Deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. Wow, you really want to push the aggro dragon, don't you? Deal 3 damage as a battle cry. Okay, I guess we'd be comparing it against, say, Leper Gnome. 2/1, 1 mana. Deal 2 damage as a death rattle, which is almost always going to go off because people cannot afford to silence a Leper Gnome in most cases. But this does 3 damage. It's definitely an aggressive card. I think it's about on par with typical face cards. So it could be played. It could be played in Face Hunter even without Dragon Synergy. But if you do put in Dragon Synergy, I just fear this guy would become pretty dang insane. Because when you have the synergy, like, you're going to have cards that will buff this because it's a dragon, or this will make other cards playable, like Blackwing Corruptor, yada yada yada. If there was a dragon face deck, this would be in it. If there was a regular face deck, this would probably be in it. It might be a tad strong, but it's not game-breaking. We can say that. Okay, next up. Goldrin. It is a Hunter Legendary 4/4 4-mana minion. Summon 2 Timberwolves as a battle cry. Really? And a Timberwolf is that's already in the game. It's the 1-mana 1/1 that gives +1 attack to all beasts on the field. So, assuming all that stuff stays alive, you're looking at a 2/2/1s and a 6/4 for 4 mana that can easily be cleared up by a swipe. But what if your opponent isn't a druid? What if your opponent is like a warrior? Then they better have played Deathspite on turn 4 and then swung with it. And then what if you already have other beasts on the field, and then those Timberwolves basically get to Battlecry, deal, 2 damage because it buffs up a Haunted Creeper or a Web Spinner or anything else you have on the field. This card would definitely be run in a Face Hunter deck. I think it would definitely be run in Mid-Range Hunter. And I think this card is actually OP. Yeah. I mean, I could see this being 5 mana and still played. In fact, I think it would still be played at 5 mana. Timberwolves +1 attack to all beasts? That's crazy. You could even play this in conjunction with Unleashed Hounds. You don't even need to think about the body. It just has a +2 attack to all your hounds. So you get 4 hounds out, and then this is going to give you 8 extra damage. It's almost like playing a Savage Roar. It leaves you with a 4/4 and 2 1/1s on the board at the end of it that synergize with each other. Just playing this as a 4/4 is giving you, effectively, 6 health, plus 12 attack, 18 stats for 4 mana. Yes, you can remove the Timberwolf, and yeah, it doesn't have charge or anything like that, but damn, that is really OP. That is Bezool, Herald of the Fell. Let me show that guy again. Level OP. Just because it's legendary doesn't necessarily mean it should be a stronger card. Otherwise, if you make too many legendaries that are really strong, all it does is it pushes new players out of the game because they won't be able to compete because the good cards are all legendary. And I think I like how epics are usually very niche, really strange effects. I don't like how some of the best cards in the game are legendary. Quite a few of them, actually, like Dr. Boom. I think more commons and more rares should just be good. Anyway, that's just my opinion. But let's see here. Where were we? Goldrin. Right. Okay, Gorlock Waddler. It's considered to be a Murloc. That's interesting. So 4 mana, 2/4, give a friendly Murloc +2, +1, and charge. So, as a battle cry, you're basically getting 4/5 of stats, as long as you have a Murloc on the field. But that Murloc also gets charge, and charge is worth probably 1.5 mana worth of stats. So, you're basically getting a 4 mana, 4/5, which is average, but you're also getting charge on top of that, which can really boost it into 5 mana territory of value, or arguably even 5.5 or 6 mana, depending on the situation, given that you have the right circumstance there. Now, like the Blackwing Corruptor, which, given the battle cry, becomes an OP card for 5 mana, this guy does have to have a Murloc on the field already, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, because people are going to be clearing your Murlocs. They know how Murloc synergy bullshit works. It's a good card. I think this card is actually not unreasonable. Because it's specifically a Murloc card, the synergy should make it a little bit OP when you get the synergy off. And having 1 extra mana worth of value, isn't too unreasonable. I mean, you think about the 3 mana, 3/3 Murloc War Leader, which can get you crazy mana value, but you do have to have Murlocs in the field for it to work still, so it's not a game-breaking card, it's just a card you would run in Murloc decks. And Murloc decks are not viable right now, so I would be fine with giving them this card. I think this would be a good addition to the game. Okay. Greg Talk. I have no idea who he is. I assume that was some kind of Warlords of Draenor creature. Okay, so it's a 2-headed Ogre. 4 mana, 5/4, which is average stats. At the end of each turn, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. End of each turn? Because that means your opponent's turn too. You would have to compare this to Falcon, which is a 3/5 Warlock minion. 4 mana, deal 2 damage to a random non-mech creature. That card is worse because that can target your own creatures, and it can also not target mech decks. If your opponent's playing a mech deck, which, you know, actually when I tried Falcon, and you do run into quite a few mech mages in the early ranks because it's an easy deck to build, it's just not that great, like when it targets your own thing. But a 5/4 that deals damage to random enemies, I just think that's a little bit strong. Yes, it's random, and that is a downside, but 2 damage per turn is a lot. And I think it would be actually OP if it was only at the end of your turns even. But if you're going to say the end of your opponent's turn too, then it's guaranteed to deal 2 damage automatically when it comes out. So it's like a 4 mana Battlecry deal 2 damage, which is already really good. But it also is a global taunt. Your opponent has to remove it. They have to swipe it. Or they take another 2 damage. And if they leave it on the board for 1 turn, then they're going to take 6 damage in total because you're not going to trade it off, at least to the point where it dies. You're just going to let its effect go and hit for 2 more damage. So this card is OP. It's arguably better than Piloted Shredder and would be run in most decks that had the legendary for it. Yeah, I can't say I'm much of a fan. It's just too much power. Okay, Ironbark Sapling, 1 mana, 1/1. Druid card. At the end of your turn, gain 1 health. So, the idea here is anti-aggro. 1 turn passes, it basically becomes a Gold Shire Footman. It doesn't gain stats on your opponent's turn, so really it becomes a 1/2, and on your turn it's a 1/2. Which is going to probably want to trade into a Leper Gnome or something like that. So, given it would only be a 1/2 and would trade 1-for-1 with a Leper Gnome, but then you take the damage anyway, it's kind of weak as an early game card, so I would think you would not want this to actually be early game. You'd probably want this to be the kind of creature you use in either a token deck or a buff deck. So you could Mark of Nature this, and maybe that's where you're going with this. You Mark of Nature it on your turn, it becomes a 3/4, you use it to bash their 1 mana minion. If they don't answer it, it gains an extra health, almost like healing for 1 every turn. And every one of your turns. And at that point, it does become a pretty decent anti-aggro card. You could also use it in conjunction with, say, not Force of Nature, Soul of the Forest, so that even when it dies, it gives you a 2/2 as a death rattle. And, it's not unreasonable. It's a balanced card. I do see the potential of, it could get a little bit annoying if it keeps gaining a health. The opponent probably will eventually just kill it, but if they're killing it, this card has kind of done its job, serving as a pseudo-taunt. And I think this card would be reasonable in the game. It would be a good matchup for a lot of the aggro cards. However, keep in mind that already in the Grand Tournament expansion pack, they've made quite a few Druid cards which are low mana and anti-aggro, so Druid doesn't necessarily have to wait until their 4 mana play in order to play a Piloted Shredder. They are going to be able to play earlier cards. I think this card would see some play in decks that could synergize with it, like Token Druid or something like that. Wouldn't be running aggro, probably not, and it's reasonable. Okay, next up, a Jade Fire Nether Seer. Your opponent discards a random card and loses 2 life, 5 attack, 2 mana, 2 health, 4 mana, which bad stats, of course, dies really easily to a lot of stuff. Your opponent discards a card, though, and loses 2 life. So that's a very strong Battlecry effect, actually, and kind of taking the opposite idea of a mill deck. I was actually talking to Cold a little bit about these kinds of cards. How, like, what if they added discard cards into the game? Well, of course, it would dramatically change how Hearthstone is played. And, like, in a Warlock deck, for instance, you'd probably run this in Handlock, just because how devastating would it be if you discard your opponent's Ragnaros or something like that? And being able to control your opponent's hand size is pretty strong. I think discarding your opponent's card is stronger than just milling them by making them overdraw. That said, 2 health is a real big drawback. Dealing the 2 damage isn't that big of a deal. So, it's like, it's bad for tempo, but it's good for making your opponent, like, deck themselves eventually, or just run out of stuff to play. I think this card is not unreasonably unbalanced. It is fairly balanced, because your opponent's just going to be like, okay, I'll Holy Smite it. So you paid 4 mana and got a creature that died to a 1 mana spell. Yeah, the battle cry sucks, but now I have tempo on you, so I can play the rest of my cards. You would play this when your opponent is really low on cards anyway, so that even though they may have an answer to it, losing the card would just be so devastating. I'm not sure if including discard cards is a good idea for Hearthstone. Even though I was talking about it, it's just once you go with this kind of card, you can't go back on it. And I'm not sure if it would be healthy for the game. If I was on the dev team, this kind of stuff would require a lot of internal testing. I'm sure they are playing around with the discard your opponent's cards kind of stuff. Magic the Gathering does it all the time. And it works in that game. But Hearthstone is a different beast. Gotta keep that in mind. Okay, next up, Jadefire Scout. 1 mana, 2/3, destroy one of your mana crystals as a charge minion. Okay, yeah, I remember hearing about this card. It was supposed to be kind of like the Death Charger from Naxxramas. Which the downside of that card was that you take 3 damage for your hero. But of course, that was an adventure-only card because the Death Charger was godly OP. Now, without question, destroying your own mana crystals is a way bigger drawback than dealing 3 damage to yourself. So, this card, a 1 mana charge, it's going to be played in like Face Warlock or something like that. You could maybe justify it in Zoo. Actually, you know, I think at a certain point, you don't really need more mana crystals in aggressive Zoo-like Warlock decks. Felguard isn't really played, but then Felguard doesn't really fit in a Zoo deck that well. With being able to charge your opponent's face for 1 mana, I think I could see this card seeing play. I think it is better than Felguard. 2/3 stats for 1 mana is crazy. And yes, 3/5 stats for a Felguard is kind of crazy too. You give it Taunt, it's basically 1 mana cheaper. Sinjin Shieldmaster. It does cost 3 mana on itself. There's really not that many opportunities for it to be a good time to play. But this card, you could just play it when your hand's just about to go empty. And you're not going to need more mana anyway, because you're just life tapping every turn to hopefully get enough cards. Though, you would have to play this in a very aggressive Zoo deck. You want to be wanting to run things like Mal'Ganis or Jaraxxus or anything huge in it. Like, there's some mid-range Demon Zoo decks that have, like, Dr. Boom. I don't think you would play this in that deck, but you might play it in, like, a Flame Imp, Jadefire Scout, Leper Gnome deck. Maybe something like that. Maybe not the Leper Gnome. It's also pretty good for controlling the board, really, when you think about it, because 3 health on a 1 mana minion, deal 2, that can deal with quite a few things on the board. So, it's a pretty powerful aggressive card. Even though it has that drawback, I think it would see play. Okay, next up, Murrows. It is a 9 mana 8/8 dragon. At the end of your turn, add a copy of this minion that died, a copy of a minion that died this game to your hand. Alright, that is similar to something like Ysera. Is it OP? No, it's not OP. Because your Sarah cards are really strong, like ridiculously strong. Like you can get, what, like a 4 mana 7/6 for the dragon or something like that. Whereas this just gives you a regular minion. And over the course of a game, to play something this big, you would have to run some earlier game minions. Oh, I just... it could maybe be run in something like a handlock, but is it good enough? Nefarian isn't really good enough. Ysera isn't even really good enough for handlock specifically. It's good enough for priest. Maybe it could be tried out in a priest or control warrior deck or something like that. But I'd say it's on par with a lot of the other mediocre 9-mana legendaries. Very few cards that actually cost that much mana can really be played. I think pretty much it's Ysera, and for Warlocks, Jaraxxus, Mal'Ganis too, Cenarius, but beyond that, there aren't too many 9-mana cards that really get played. So I think this would be a card that sits out most decks, even if Dragon became a thing, because they're just better cards. I think I'd rather have Onyxia. You know, you get 6 whelps on the board immediately rather than a card in your hand. Kind of around the balance line of Chromagus, where it's almost good enough, but it's not really. You know, meh. Okay, next up. Nether Set Bladelord. 4 mana, 4/3. Makes me think Oldham from Cataclysm. Has charge while you have a weapon equipped. Oh, okay. 4 mana charge if you have a weapon. Rogues are always going to have a weapon equipped because they have daggers. So really you're looking at a 4/3 charge that 80% of the time is going to be able to trigger, and the other 20% you just play something else instead. Given specifically that it's a rogue card we're talking about, that is actually OP. Whoops. Because 3 health on a charge minion, that's a ton. Like, well, actually, no, hold on. Let me back up a minute. The charge minion that warriors have, I forget what it's called. Hellscream Soldier, Gramash Soldier, 4/3 charge. That just has charge all the time. 4/3 charge for class card isn't actually that OP. No, it's really not. It's good. It would push a aggressive face rogue, possibly. I mean, that's not out of the question. Rogue isn't the least aggressive deck. Yeah, it's not as OP as I was thinking, but it's still playable. I think it's still playable, and people would try it. Why this would be actually quite deadly would be double Cold Blood, and then you could stealth it. So 12 attack to the face on a turn 7, then you stealth it with Conceal. Next turn, hit him for another 12 damage. So with combo this becomes good. As just a 4/3 charge, it's about the equivalent of the warrior card, which used to be played in face warrior, but face warrior died. And I don't know if face rogue would become a thing. They're kind of missing out with the well, and you know, rogue hero power is a lot better at going face than a warrior's, because warrior gives them HP, rogue can do damage. That's something to think about. Rogue hero power can also control the board. Maybe this would see play. Maybe this is better just because it's in rogue. That's interesting. Okay, next up, Nightbane, which was a boss in Karazhan. Actually, my favorite WoW instance, or raid rather. 6 mana, 7/4 dragon, weak to BGH, of course. Battle cry, deal 4 damage. Death rattle, draw a card. Huh. Okay, so the downside is it's got weak stats. Upside is it's a dragon, so dragon synergy. Although pretty much will die very easily to just about anything. But battle cry, deal 4 damage. That's powerful. Death rattle, draw a card. That's also pretty powerful. I think this is a good legendary. Given it's only 6 mana too. For some reason my head was telling me there was 7 mana like Dr. Boom. That is actually really strong. I think this card would be run as the 6 mana card in basically any decks that we're going to run 6 mana cards. Compare it to Emperor Tharzan, which is 5/5, reduce the cost of your cards going forward. This could basically almost one-shot Emperor Tharzan, then put a 7/4 on the board, and Death Rattle draw a card. It's good enough to basically annihilate Tharzan and get you enough tempo to basically counteract what Tharzan does in most cases. It's just 1 damage short of killing it outright. That's really strong. 4 damage might even be too much. 3 damage seems more reasonable. Okay. The weakness, though, BGH, but, I mean, with Battlecry and Death Rattle like that, you're not that sad about it getting BGH'd. Okay, next up. Nova Totem. Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to all enemies. 0/2 Totem, 3 mana. The problem is it has 0 attack. How are you going to trigger it? Are you going to destroy your own minion with, like, a lightning bolt? It's... okay. You compare this to Mechanical Sheep. Mechanical Sheep. 1 attack, 1 health, 2 mana mech minion. That Death Rattle deal 2 damage to everything. Okay, the advantage here is it only hits enemies. So you would have to play this with Defender of Argus. So it's a turn 7 play. You Defender of Argus this with something else, possibly. Or turn 5 Sun Fury Protector play. Well, if you play it with Sun Fury Protector and they don't silence it, that does become like a pseudo-consecration. Pseudo-consecration for 5 mana that your opponent has to trigger. So they get the opportunity to at least respond to it. It's not OP. It would be another option for board clear for Shaman, but you would have to be playing like Defender of August, Sun Fury Protector for it to really work. Or you would have to destroy your own minion, which isn't totally out of the question. If there was something like a Void Terror for Shaman, that would be actually really crazy. If this was a Warlock card, that would be crazy. Simply because you could Void Terror it, you could Power Overwhelming it. But Shaman just doesn't have that many ways to trigger their own minion. Yeah, well, Abusive Sergeant. You could play Abusive Sergeant. So if you want to play a Shaman, like a Zoo, kinda, that's worth considering. But then you know, it becomes kind of like a Demon Wrath, which isn't played at all. 3 mana deal 2 damage to all creatures that aren't demons. The 2 damage to your opponent's face is irrelevant. Meh. It's almost good enough to be worth considering. I don't know if it's good enough to see play, but it would be an interesting addition to the game. And that's usually what you want out of an epic card, so that's actually a pretty well-designed card, I think. Okay. Purple Netherwing Drake 2. I guess that means version 2. 6 mana, 5/3 charge. If you're holding a dragon, draw a card. Okay, you compare that to, say, Azure Drake and Leroy Jenkins. Leroy's 5 mana, deal 6 damage, but it's only playable at the very end of the game. This guy, for 6 mana, can be played at any point in time you want to dump 6 mana on it. And if you if you get the Battlecry, which you probably would because you'd be playing this in an aggressive dragon deck, you get to draw a card, which makes it a 5 mana, 5/3 charge. As a neutral minion, which is pretty dang strong. I do recall taking a look at a previous version of this that he came up with. I think it used to be like 5 mana or something, which this would be OP. I think at this point, because it has to be in a dragon deck specifically, it's pretty well balanced now. So I'd be okay with that being in the game. And it does push a face dragon. Draconid Crusher comes to mind, etc. Reasonable card. Good alternative to Azure Drake if you want to be more aggressive. Persistent Sniper. Stealth. At the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. You could compare that with Leper Gnome, kind of, where Leper Gnome's basically guaranteed to get 2 damage off. Though, that creature does require you to pay 2 mana. And that is a downside. At the same time, though, it does have stealth. You could keep it in waiting until you could hit like a 1/1 creature and then get some value there. Being able to take out a creature and keep doing 2 damage to your opponent's hero. I think you would just leave this stealth pretty much the whole game like a Shade of Naxxramas. And unless your opponent's going to consecrate just to kill this guy, it's going to last 3 or 4 or 5 turns, which is going to deal like 6, 8, 10 damage. And then you still have a creature on the board that you can use to trade if you have to. That's pretty OP for Face Hunter. That's pretty OP for mid-range Hunter. That's just OP for any kind of Hunter. The damage will stack up. They released a new card called Brave Archer, which is 2/1. If your hand is empty and it's at the end of your turn, given it's a 1-mana minion, you use your hero power with an empty hand, and Brave Archer will deal 2 damage to your opponent's face. This just does it all the time with no conditions whatsoever, and it has stealth, so it sticks on the board forever. Yeah, that's OP. It's just OP. If you give that to Hunters, Hunters will just win. Power Infusion. Destroy a friendly minion. A random minion gains its attack and health. 2-mana spell, Power Infusion. Huh. If you had Wind Fury or something like that, maybe? I guess. Or if you want to play Enhance Mechano, sacrifice the creature that didn't get Wind Fury to buff up another one as a finisher. That just doesn't sound right. Why not just play Power Overwhelming? Do you really want one big minion, honestly? Like, Void Terror, yeah, you can get... It's basically a Void Terror effect, except you don't really get a new minion. You just kind of transfer one to another. I think 2 mana is way too much for this card. I could see this being a 0-mana spell, but at 2 mana, it's not worth the mana cost. It's too much. 1 mana at most. And even then, I don't know if it's that great of a card. I mean, you're just going to push something into BGH territory. Sure, you can make like a 12/12 or something like that. Okay, welcome to Siphon Soul, to Hax, to Polymorph, to BGH. Execute. And then you're just sad because you lost 2 minions for nothing. Okay, Prince Xavier, Zavilus, whatever. 5 mana, 5/5. Okay, average stats. Whenever you play a card, draw a card, your other demons have +2 attack. 5/3, excuse me. Even as a 5/3, that is really good. Compare that to Mal'Ganis. Mal'Ganis has to be played for 9 mana, or a Void Caller. Really, when you're looking at the Mal'Ganis buff, you're mostly looking at the trade potential, so it's the attack that's the important thing, not the HP, because Mal'Ganis is going to die the turn after it comes out. BGH, they're just going to find a way to remove it no matter what. So, it's kind of like a mini Mal'Ganis, which would already make it really strong, but in addition to that, you could Emperor Tharzan to make this a combo card where you play it for 4 mana, play a bunch of more cards after this, and then it just draws a bunch. So it's like a Mal'Ganis combined with the Cult Master, which makes this a game-breakingly OP card. I think remove the when you play a card, draw a card effect, and then we could talk about it being a 5 mana, your other demons have +2 attack, 5/3, play it on the back of a Implosion, and that would be a fine play still. You have this draw stuff in there, and this card is just really OP. Like, pick one or the other, and this one, even this one alone would probably be OP. But pick one or the other. Both of these combined is game-breaking. Even if it only has 3 health. Because this card can do stuff the moment it comes into play. It's not like you have to wait a turn. Okay, next up. Proto Drake. We have a 4/5 for 6 mana. Has +1 attack while you have a dragon. Your dragons have charge. This card, +1 attack while you have a dragon. Your dragons have charge. Does this also include your dragon? Please tell me this doesn't include this doesn't include the Proto Drake itself, right? Okay, I'm gonna look at this 2 ways. If this includes itself, which it would by the text, by, just reading this, this card is game-breaking. A 5/5 charge is already ridiculous, but also gives your other dragons charge. Come on, really? Just no. That is just the end of the world combo. Let's say, for instance, though, that it does not mean this card specifically. then it's more reasonable. You're playing a 6 mana, 5/5. It's not so easy to get other dragons on the field if they aren't already on the field, and if they are already on the field, then the charge is irrelevant. So, yeah, turn 10, you could get a lot of value out of this, being able to play a couple weaker dragons, like the Bronze Drake. Let me bring that up again. Play a couple of these, you know, charge your opponents for 8 damage, and that would be fair. But if you give this card itself charge, basically you could read this as a 5/5 charge minion, which is really, really good. If it's that version where this is a 5/5 charge minion, it is broken. If we're talking about the only your other dragons, then it is a reasonable card, and I would be okay with seeing it in the game.